Hi everyone, welcome to another WAES Tech Talk. Welcome to people in Utrecht, welcome to people here together with us. We are going to have three presenters this time. It's going to be a bit different. First, I want to introduce Newton. Thanks, Newton. It's good to see you.
And everyone.
The stage is all yours.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Here in Eindhoven, the people in Utrecht, and also the people live on YouTube. So today, I'm going to talk about mutation tests. So mutation test mastery. And you may ask me, how can I master something in just a short 30 minutes presentation? And of course, I have prepared something in order to get this done. So first, I would like to talk about me. Then you get to know each other a little bit better. Then I'm going to talk about mutation test. How is mutation test? What is mutation test? And then you're going to see the advantage of it. Of course, you need to see how to perform the mutation test. And then you're going to understand the reports that are generated by the mutation tests. And there's a real-world scenario that I'd like to explore with you. And then there's some limitations. There's no perfect word. Well, of course, we have some downsides. And of course, at the end, I'm going to give you my personal opinion, the conclusion of it, and I hope to save some time at the end of the presentation. So let's get started. First, who's Newton? So that's me and Isaac Newton. The fun fact is I was named after Isaac Newton. My father is a really big fan of British people. My brother's name is James because of James Bond. So yeah, it's my father. I'm Brazilian. I was born and raised in São Paulo, Brazil. This picture was took in Rio de Janeiro. I think it's the most known Brazilian city. And this is real me. I'm a big fan of Formula One, kind of addicted to it. This photo was took last year in Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium. It was my first time there. You can see by my smile that was one of my happiest moments in my life to be there. I always dreamed about it. And I'm married. This is my wife, Thaisi. I proposed her on a plane flying to the Netherlands. So I talked to the phone, proposed her. It was a special moment for us. We got the compliment from the pilot and from the crew. It was a really amazing moment. But okay, it's enough knowing about me. So let's see. What's mutation test? What it is. So mutation test, by definition, is something that changes. It's a permanent change in something or an object changing into another thing. For example, you have butterfly. First, it's a caterpillar, builds its cocoon, and then turns it to a butterfly. So that is mutation. So it's a change in something. So what is mutation test? It's basically the same thing. It's make some change in your code in order to see how the test will perform against these new changes. So let's apply this concept to our code. So here we have a sentence, a basic sentence, which is comparing some string if equals null. So basically, that's it. And by applying the concept of mutation test, we need to change that sentence a little bit just to see how the tests you're going to perform. So changing it, instead of compare if it equals, we're going to see if it's different than null. So that's the essence of mutation test. Change your code just a little bit to see how the test is going to perform. So, of course, after all of this, of making the change, we should rerun the test and expect them to fail. So we have some advantages, but of course, a little bit of spoiler. We don't need to change our code by ourselves, but we're going to see that a little bit further. So by using mutation test in your code, you can have a lot of advantages. I'm going to explore some of them. So you can detect the weak spots in your test suite. So you have your test suite. By running mutation tests, you can see the weak spot on your test suite see where you are not testing enough your code. And of course, you can validate this test suite by assuring that you have the good testing in your code. Just mutation test, you tell you if your test it's good enough or if not. And of course, by having a good quality of code, by having a good code base, you can also improve your code quality. So mutation tests can help you have a better quality of the code and can prevent regression bugs, which is when you introduce a previous bug in your code, or you can introduce new bugs in your code. So mutation tests, you prevent those kind of things because you rerun your test, you change your code a little bit to perform it, and then to see if you're going to have a new bug in your code or not. So now we're getting to the interesting part of this presentation. It's how to perform a mutation test. I just told before that you need to do some things in your code in order to get your test running again against that change. But how can you do that? So there's a lot of things that you can do. So as I mentioned, you don't need to change your code by yourself. You can use some tools. For instance, for Java and Kotlin, you have just two frameworks. The first one, PyTest. The second one, Major Framework. Major Framework, it's kind of outdated, but it's still in the market. PyTest, it's the most common for Java and Kotlin. For Python, Mutates and MutPy, you can use one of them. I already used Mutates once. For PHP, you can use Infection, which for me, it's a good name. C#, JS, and Scala, you can use Strike Mutator. In my personal opinion, it's the best one because of the reports, because of the way of using. It's pretty nice to use. And in this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate using Java with PyTest. If you want to use PyTest, of course, you can run it against your Kotlin code. It works perfectly fine. And to use it, you just need to do this. Apply this plugin on your Maven code. If you are a Gradle user, there's also a way of using it with Gradle. You just go to documentation and use it using Gradle. So now I'm going to show you the code. Oh, it's here. So first, let's take a look at the POM file. With the, I put here the plugin that we need to start using our mutation test, PyTest. It's pretty simple. You just put your plugin here, and then you can set the target classes. So what is the target classes? Is the class that you want to test against. First, this is my class, my main class, and this is my test class. So let's take a look on my code here, my main code, which is, let me make a little bit bigger. Okay, I think it's way better to see now. So basically, it's a simple method. It's a code that I hijacked from HackerRank, which is conversion from 12 hours format to 24 hours format. So there's a lot of ways to implement this code, but I choose this way here. The way of implementation, for now, it's not important, but I just choose this, which is I'm doing some comparisons. If it's less than 12 or if it's PM, I do the conversion here. And then I have the return, which should be something like this. If you have inputs like the first one there, 11 hours, you should return 11 at night, 11 p.m., which is 23. So the code basically do that. And then we have test class. Of course, if you want to make sure that your code is good enough, you should test it. There's a lot of way of testing your code, but the first one should be the unit test. Even before your code, if you use TDD, so you have to start writing your tests and then make sure that your code is good enough. So let's run the test, but let's run with the coverage just to see if we're covering everything in your code. So, okay, you run it out. Let's take a look on the class. Everything is passing. The code should be good. So this is an interesting thing. We have 100% of methods, which is only one, but 100% of lines it's covered. So everything is green in here. So we have a good quality of code. So we can deploy it to prod if you want. Sonar will not complain about it. Everything is green. But is that sure? Let's see what mutation tests tell us about it. So to run mutation tests, you put the plugin on your phone. There's a two-way of running it. You can use command line and mvn pytest report. This is a simple command. And you have a lot of commands. For the first one, it's help to get some help. This command here, mutation coverage, will run the mutation itself. PyTest report will generate the report. The other ones will generate the report, but for specific modules or for just rerun the report for another turn. You change your code, you need to run the report again. You can use the report aggregate. But let's run just the mutation coverage. Okay, running, build successful. But you can see some things in here. Okay. So let's try to understand what happened here. So basically, mutation tests run or unit tests several times. And every time that mutation test runs, it changes a little bit our code. And then we run again our tests. And it generates a report, which you're going to generate now. So every report will be here in target, Python reports, and then you have an index file, index HTML here, which is our report, and you can open it here. Let me refresh a bit. Okay, this is a report. So the report says our line is 100% coverage, which we already know, but the mutation cover in the test strength, it's not 100%. Let's try to understand what these reports are trying to say to us. So for this, I'm going to go back to the presentation. Okay, let's understand the report. So first, we have mutation coverage. What is mutation coverage? So it's the ratio of the number of mutation tests. Oh, I have to do something in here. Wait a minute. Okay. Now for the people online, it's way better. So it's the ratio of the number of mutations queued by tests to all number of mutations generated. And also we have the test strength with it's the ratio of mutations queued by all number of mutations generated in all your code. So they are quite similar. For instance, you only have one class and one method. Because of that, the number are the same. But if you have more than one class or more than one method, the number will change a bit because the test strength is against all your tests, and the mutation coverage is just for that specific mutation generated by a specific class. So let's go back to the report a bit. Okay, so now we know that our mutation cover is not good enough. Let's try to get deeper into it. So here you have our class. You can click on it, and then you can see your class and your methods, and then you can try to figure out what's happening here. You have two red lines. So these two red lines, it's not good enough by somehow. We need to figure that out. So what happened in here? So here we have mutations. I already explained mutation, it's a change in your code. And we have a lot of kind of mutations with this conditional boundary, empty returns, false returns, increments, invert snags, math, negate conditionals, and so on. So those mutations are performed on our code, for instance, we have this equal sign here. This equal sign here could be changed to I don't know, it's sign out. If something and or another, you can change to, for instance, for another operator here. And also the less than 12 could be changed to greater than 12, and so on. So the mutation test will change that specific thing and rerun the code and then expect the test fails. But in that case, the mutation happened in here, but the test is still passing. So we have a mutation that survived our test. We don't kill that mutation because that mutation happens in your code, but the test is still passing without a fail. Let's demonstrate it by changing our code. So we have here, if a suffix ignore case, it's equal PM, and given hour, it's less than 12. So let's put just a small sign here, less equal than 12. This changed a bit, because if it's 12, you should enter in this if clause. Let's run the test again. We should expect our test at least one fails. And everything is still passing, as you can see here. So what you need to do now? There are two approaches that you can do in order to improve your code. The first one, it's try to look in your code, try to see if there's something that you can change in your code in order to get more reliable thing or more safe thing, or get rid of those kind of errors. Or another thing, it's add more test case in your code in order to get more reliable test case and prevents that in the future someone change your code and introduce a new bug. So let's keep this that way for now. And I already have some tests done in here. Let's uncomment. I just wrote 2 tests in here. I have to do this. And let's run all of them now. Okay, we have one then failing. That's why, because we have a bug on our code. Let's go back to the original code, get rid of the bug, and then run again. Okay, everything is green now. We're sure of that? Maybe not. Maybe it's real good now. What you can do is run the mutation coverage again, generate a new report, and let's take a look on the report. So everything is green now. So what happened here? A lot of mutations were made against our code, so those operators were changed, but the test is still good enough to catch all those new bugs or all these new mutations. So our mutations was killed. So every time we change our code, we introduce a mutation. The mutation will be killed if we test fail. So the mutation is killed. So we have a good quality of tests. And of course, we can assure that your code it's good enough to go to production because you are preventing introducing new bugs. Of course, you can add more test case, you can improve a little bit more, but for this presentation, I think you have enough. So I'm gonna go back to the presentation. Use presentation view, should be good now. So, okay, let's talk about the real world scenario. So if you aiming to apply this on your code, on your project, on your company, so the thing that you need to do is choose a project, implement the mutation tests, see the results, and work on it. It's pretty simple. So you don't need magic on it. Even if you don't need approval, because you can run only on your machine. You don't need to have this implemented by your company to run it. It's just a plugin that you can add on Pwn, and after everything is green, you can get rid of it and deliver to production. And I did that. I did that before in a project that I was working on, and for do this, I decided to choose the top-rated project in my company. I went to Sonar, find a project was good enough. Everyone likes to work in this code because we have in quality of bugs. We don't have bugs. We have only you have 93% of the code covers. So this should be a good code. So everyone wants to work on that. And I decided, let's run the mutation test and see if the code is good enough. And I ran. And that was the result. I just omitted the class names for privacy. But this was the result. As you can see in here, there are some tests that were not testing nothing. Just was there just to get your lines covered. But it was not fully test your code. If you do some change, if you do something, you can get a bug. And in fact, in this project, I found a bug that was there just waiting for some specific inputs to happen. And of course, you have to work on it, and you have to improve your quality of code. So you can see here a lot of headlines, things. And yeah, it was a lot of work. The quality of code was good for our previous parameters, but in that scenario was not that good. And yeah, I work on it, I improve a little bit, and was really fun to work on it. But of course, nothing is always flowers. We have some limitations, we have some signs. And the main downside, it's the computationally expensive, because every time you run the code, you change the code, run again, change the code, run again. The plugin does it for you, but it's expensive. You have to rerun again and again. And if you have a huge amount of code to run the unit tests, you'll be really expensive and took some time. Of course, sometimes can happen some false positives, which is the report can generate, oh, you have a mutation survived here. I have to kill that one, but it's not a real mutation. You have a false positive. And can only test for a specific mutation. So a specific operators can be tested against, but not for your methods, for your inputs, only for specific mutations. Now, of course, let's see, what is my opinion? So mutation tests can be good for you, because it can help you to write more reliable tests, more reliable code. And as a developer, I assume that you should know the many tools as possible, because, of course, you are a craftsman. You have to use the best tool on your project, on your life. And if you know them, you can choose the right one to apply. But of course, it's your decision. You may use it or you may not, but it's good for you to know about it. And for those who like to see the code, who wants to try it by yourself, you can scan the QR code, you just access that link to see the GitHub with the code. Thank you, everyone. I think we have some time for questions.
Yes, we have some time for questions. Does anyone here have questions? Notes? Okay.
This mutation test, you can apply only to unit testing, or you can try to have you applied to all kinds of testing?
It's good for unit tests. I mean, it's not good for integration tests, because sometimes integration tests, you don't have that kind of operators to be mutated. So it's mainly for unit tests.
Does someone has a question?
Have you tried this before doing a pilot as a pilot way?
Yes, yes. There are two for this PyTest. There's a specific tool for that can give you some gates on your pipeline to prevent that you can go to production with bad quality of code. But yeah, it's possible.
Is there any kind of problems that end up being false positives usually?
Yeah. I never I've been using this for, I don't know, I worked with that for 4 years. I never saw any false positive. But the problem is you can losing time, because show up a false positive and make losing time, try to find what's the solution, but there's no solution because it's a false positive. So that can happen, unfortunately.
So if you would want to use this, what would your advice to recommend your team leader would be to start using it?
That's a good question. You need to sell. As I mentioned, you can use by yourself on your computer, but sometimes you have to sell this to your group of colleagues, to your product manager. But that's simple. This is improve your quality of code. This prevents bugs in production, and no one wants to have a bug in production. So yeah, that's a good way of selling it. You can say, okay, you can show the report, you can run on your machine. Took a couple of minutes to run it, and you can show them the report and say, our quality of code is not good enough. You should improve it. You can use this to in your team. You can apply this to on your team.
So you use it a lot then, you're by yourself?
Yeah. It's my help map.
Let's say that you want to start to apply that in an existing project. Is it possible, for example, when you define the gates, to apply only for new code, like to prevent the new code to be failed?
Yes.
Or you always have to put the gate for the old project?
Yes, you can apply for a specific class, for instance, only for new classes, only for specific classes. You can have some different gates. You can apply as you want.
Cool. Then I have one question from YouTube here. Is from James Kelvin. Can mutation testing be applied to any programming language, or it's limited to a specific language?
It depends, the famous answer. So if you have a tool for it, you can use that tool for your specific language. I show on the beginning of the presentation some of them that you can use for different programming language, for Python, for Scala, for C#. And of course, depends of the language. Maybe Go, they don't have some for Go. I'm not sure about it, but of course, there are some programming language that is not good for it.
And there is an idea, build it.
Yeah.
Put it, make it open source. I think everybody's going to be happy.
Exactly.
Cool. Then I think our time for questions is over. I would like to thank you for making the presentation today.
Oh,
With a small gift.
nice. Thank you. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Just before you go, I want to announce the other two that we're going to have. We're going to have Erikson and Diego presenting more about passwordless and auto building. Please, coming, and then we switch, please.
Let me take my laptop with me. I don't think they will need it.
Negro, te salteas la parte de la primera demo.
Put in front of. This one. Okay.
Just some small preparation, guys.
Yeah.
Do not
Just
go away.
a little bit more. Yeah. Just a couple of things here. Just to start from zero. Nice.
Cool. Are you guys ready?
Yes.
Okay. Then the stage is all yours.
Saltear. Por allá. think it's right here.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. So now it's time to talk about a little bit of passwordless authentication. But before doing that, a small introduction about us. This is a picture of us. We are not drinking beers. We are drinking tea, just in case. My name is Erikson. I'm from Lima, Peru. I've been living in this amazing country for 1.5 years. Two things I love about the Netherlands is the amazing weather and the amazing food you have. I am really interested in topics related to startups, investment, entrepreneurship, and also cybersecurity. And with me today is my brother, Diego. Please, Diego, jump to the stage.
Okay. Yep. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here too. Yeah, something a little bit about me. Most people here maybe already knows us. We have something here. I'm from Peru. I was living in Brazil for some years already. And there I started working. I was a Java developer before, then I became DevOps, and I started working in this cybersecurity world, more about authentication, and I got passionate about it. Yeah, I have 3 dogs, 1 in Peru, 2 are living here with me. I enjoy in this amazing country. Yeah, I think that's pretty much about me.
Nice. So what are we going to see today? First, we're going to start with a live example about passwordless authentication to see how it works. After that, we're going to see what is happening behind the scenes. We're going to explore the 5.2 protocol, how our web applications interact with the components in order to provide this passwordless authentication process to our end users. And after that, we're going to see how you can implement a passwordless authentication process in your company using HaloID, which is an authentication platform for passwordless that will help you to provision a passwordless process in just a couple of minutes instead of wasting a couple of months. So
yeah, can do it.
Let's start with the example.
Yeah, this is kind of spoiler alert, because a live example about how implementing passwordless would be basically something like, this is your normal application, very normal login form that you have. But first thing I will do is start my HaloID services, because I'm using HaloID. This is spoiler alert. We will, of course, do something else later, explain a little bit later how it works. So I will start here with my client. Let's give it some time for loading. Okay, so I will register WAES. Oh, okay. I will add my client. We will add test demo. No worries. We will explain this with a lot of details later. And now here in this part, I just need to refresh my client with a new client ID. Let's refresh it. Yeah, my machine is a little bit old, so maybe WAES can find some new machine for me. Yeah. So far, so good. Let's start again, and let's put, for example, I don't know, Hasis at haloid.io. Let's log in with HaloID. And yeah, I think my machine is crashing for some reason. Let's log in. Yeah, I think the container crashed my machine.
Oh.
Yeah. Maybe you can explain just the theory.
Yeah. It happens always when we are live.
Yes.
So
this thing happens. So too much time I had running the containers and my machine is just dead. Yep.
Yeah, no problem. We can see the theory.
Back to you.
Yes, so what we were expecting to see is that, as you saw in the web page, we didn't have any input field for the passwords. So that means that we are going to use the internal authenticator that this MacBook Pro has. So what is implemented behind the scenes? Basically, we are implementing the FIDO2 protocol, which is a combination of the Web Authentication API and the Client to Authenticator protocol. Now, let's see how our application interacts with this protocol. First, we have a web application. We know that the web applications are running on top of a web browser. And in order to create these passwords or these credentials, we are using authenticators. But how our web applications are able to connect to an authenticator, which is a piece of hardware? For this, we use the Web Authentication API. The Web Authentication API is already implemented in most of the modern web browsers right now, so you don't have to do anything yourself. It's already there in Chrome or Firefox or Opera or Mozilla, whatever. There are two types of authenticators. The first one is the platform authenticator, which all devices have. For example, this MacBook Pro has a fingerprint scanner right now. This platform authenticator is also known as internal authenticator or built-in authenticator. But what happens if you don't have any authenticator in your device? You can always use an external authenticator or a roaming authenticator. But in order to use this external authenticator, we have to use the client to authenticator protocol. Last but not least, we have the FIDO2 server, which will manage all the storage for the credentials, the public keys, the credentials that you are creating for your users. And this is basically how our web applications will interact with the FIDO2 protocol. Now let's see what's happened when we want to register a new user in our applications. So again, we have the same components in this architecture, but we are abstracting the authenticator because it doesn't matter if you have an internal authenticator or an external authenticator. At the end of the day, they are both authenticators. So the first thing that will happen is that your web application will send a request to the FIDO2 server with the username pointing to the /register endpoint. The FIDO2 server will send a response where we're going to have the challenge, which is a random value generated by the server that will be used in the last step in order to verify if all this flow is completed correctly. Then we have the user information. In this case, we only have the username. And then we're going to receive also the reliant party information. This is really important because here we're going to receive the reliant party ID. The reliant party ID matches with your web application domain name, and the authenticator will use this information to generate credentials that are coupled to your web application. It means if you create a credential for wearewaes.com, for example, you won't be able to use it in another page. So our web application will send this information to the authenticator by using the Web Authentication API. The authenticator will run a verification process, will ask you for your fingerprint. If you are using an Android device, for example, you have more authenticators like PIN or pattern or face recognition authenticators. If everything succeeds here, we're going to send back the response to the web application, and the web application will send the information to the FIDO2 server, where we are sending our public key, our credential ID, and some other metadata related to this authentication process. It's also important to mention that the authenticator will store the private key. So it means if we are not using passwords, we are using credentials. And when we use credentials, we are using public key cryptography, which means we have a public key and a private key. The private key will never leave the authenticator, will stay there, and the only information we are sending to the server is the public key and our username. So with this, we are more secure because we are not sharing any secrets or any private information. Then the server will perform a server verification. It means we'll check if our origin in the request matches with the reliant party ID, which is basically the domain name. We'll check if the signature match. It means all the information that we send from our authenticator to the server is encrypted with the private key. So here we'll check if the public key matches with the private key. And also we check if the challenge is the same challenge that was sent in step 1. For the user authentication process, it's almost the same. We're going to send the username that we want to authenticate to another endpoint. The server will send back a response with the challenge and an array of allowed credentials. It means that as a user, we can have different authenticators because we can use internal authenticators in your MacBook Pro, but you can also use an external authenticator in order to have more options to log in your system. And even this is a good practice, because if for some reason you lose your USB-like authenticator, you can always have your authenticator in your MacBook Pro. The web application will send the information again to the authenticator. We're going to do a user verification. If everything succeeds, we're going to send back the response to the web server. The information will be sent back to the FIDO2 server, and the same verification process will be executed. So as you can see, in order to authenticate and register a new user, there are a lot of things that we have to do. These diagrams are really abstracted. And if you want to implement passwordless yourself, you will have to first read all the specification, I mean the web authentication specification, and also you will have to create your FIDO2 server from scratch. Also, you will have to provide an abstraction in your front-end side in order to manage all this interaction between the FIDO2 server, the authenticators, the encryption, decryption, parsing, and a lot of things that happens there. And probably you are like this, right? Like, what the friend you're asking? I almost said the word. So but here's an important question. Do we really need to implement all ourselves? And as good software engineers, we know that the answer is always, it depends. But in order to help you with that response, we're going to show you a more easy way and also reliable way to implement passwordless authentication in your company by using HaloID. In HaloID, we abstract all this process for you. It means we provide a HaloID server, which is basically a FIDO compatible server, which implements all these details in the specification. And also we provide an abstraction in your front-end application, which is the HaloID Web SDK that will manage all this interaction between your web applications, the FIDO server, and the authenticators. So with this, you don't have to wait a lot of time. You can implement a passwordless authentication in your company, in your project, in your startup in just a couple of minutes instead of a couple of months. Now, Diego will show you how you can configure HaloID in your project and also how easy it is to configure an existing web application with the HaloID Web SDK. So, Diego, show the magic, please.
Okay. So yeah, since the demo was not working, let's implement from zero. Okay, so let's go first to HaloID. But from a lot of time, Erikson and I were sharing content about HaloID. Maybe some of you already know, but maybe a lot of you doesn't know what is HaloID and what are we talking about. HaloID is a product, it's a service, it's a platform that we released responding to one demand that we identified while we were working in another product. We won the WAES hackathon last year with a shopping cart product. And while we were implementing security, then we discovered, okay, that part of authentication is really a problem because passwords can be stolen, can be leaked. At least in Brazil, every day, one data breach was happening to every company. So this was a even bigger problem than the original one that we were trying to solve. Yes. That's why we started developing HaloID. And yeah, as Erikson said, his background is more about entrepreneurship. My background is about cybersecurity. Said, okay, let's do something amazing together. Okay, so if you go to haloid.io, you will find this, or of course, a page with basically all information that you need in order to implement HaloID. Because as Erikson said, implementing passwordless authentication using FIDO2 and WebAuthn is a very difficult process. It's your decision spending 2 months learning all of this about cryptography, the CTAP protocol, storing that, the private and public key exchange, how that works. It's a really big headache. Or you can use a third-party provider for this, and that's what we want to do. We want to make things more simpler to allow you to implement a very high security standard used by most applications worldwide. So maybe when you are doing some transaction in your local bank account or something like this, you need to put your fingerprint or something like this for logging in. That's not too easy to implement as maybe it looks. So if we want to deploy for now locally Halo ID, because we are actually working in a new version for getting it cloud, so those problems that doesn't work maybe never have. But actually you can deploy it locally because we have some documentation for do it. If you are familiar with Docker Compose, you will see here that there is a lot of documentation about it, about how to getting started and start your journey in the passwordless way. So first of all, you will have the local setup that is deploying a local instance just for testing for your Hello World application. More than for using in your real life scenarios. For first, let's start by getting you familiar with how passwordless works, and an easy way, a very friendly way. So for that, you just need to download, copy and paste this code of Docker Compose. It's the same code that I have here and that is actually running. Here are my containers running, the authenticator, the console, and the controller. Then we will do something about tenant onboarding. In the beginning of this meeting, you saw that I registered a tenant name, a domain. What's a tenant name? Since this application is meant to be a cloud service, first of all, you need to register yourself as one more tenant of our platform. That's all. And this can be like the name of your company, your corporation, whatever you want, and your domain. Since we are in localhost, okay, our domain is localhost. And here you have maybe a better explanation about how it works, and create your first client. What is a client? A client is exactly what we created to interact with Halo ID. A client could be an application. For example, I can create here a WAES intranet, and maybe for test environment. Since it will be a test environment, maybe I don't want to add any security key. I can talk about it later, but let's just create this. And it will generate a client ID, that is this one. I can copy it, and I can start using it. So here, I can see that I didn't provide any keys at all. I have my client ID, and that's all I need for start interacting with Halo. So now, coming here to my login page, this is the URL of the container running my backend. In the real life scenario, will be the URL of the Halo ID platform. I just need to replace this. And once I did this, if I come back to the documentation, after creating my client, okay, I have information about the security keys. For now, we will skip this. And the web application login. And this shows how you can implement Halo ID in your front application. For example, here is how to initialize our SDK, because in order to make it simple, as Erikson said, from the client side, there is a lot of work to do. You as client need to interact with the calls to the relying party, that in this case, our relying party is Halo ID. And you need to manage all the calls. So for now, I will only use my user registration function. That I will copy this. I will copy just the content. And I will find my method for registration. Let's put it right here, because it's for the login. I want to register one user, let's say. So I will put this, and I have my process for return this process response. Oh, this is the catch. Okay. Yep. So this is the parameter that was missing. Okay. Now I will implement this in my front-end layer that is here in project, view, login, my login.html. And yeah, I will put it login. Okay. And sorry. No, you don't need to pass the parameter. It will get it. This is a framework that you can get a parameter from the input text box. Yeah, it's Aurelia.
Tell them the framework's name.
Aurelia.
This
is for us, is the best framework that we ever tried with front-end development. So I think I already copied the client ID, right? Yeah, let's see. So let's register. Let's now Diego at helloid.io, for example. And let's see. Still looks like my Chrome is crashing this little bit. So it's a live coding session. Let's see what's happening. Actually, it's not happening anything. Yeah, it's some issue with the bottom of the client itself. But yeah, whatever. What is going to do? Normally, all the science that Erikson was talking about for registering the user or do a login is being abstracted in just that single method of the HalloID SDK here. So actually, you don't need to worry about anything. You just need to worry about initialize the SDK, that is the HalloID client, and calling it in your code. So yeah, this is something that is happening with my client itself. But anyway, that's how the entire process of implementing HalloID works. Now, coming back to our documentation, I was talking about some security keys. And what are security keys? Because you know that here you have a client ID, and you see here that I can do requests against that client ID. So if that client ID got lost or got leaked, basically anyone is able to call your client, make a DDoS attack, or if since it's a cloud service and you are charged for the usage, I can make your bill go even bigger if I am a bad person. But in order to do that, that's the purpose of the security keys. If you, for example, in your production environment, let's say here, WAES intranet prod, you have two options. You can generate your key pair by yourself, or you can let HalloID generate your key pair. What is a key pair? It's a private and a public key. Those keys are used for encrypt and decrypt anything. So if HalloID generates your key pair, you're at the client, and here you have the private key. The private key, as maybe you already know, shouldn't be shared with anyone. It's a cryptographic key that you can configure this private key in some kind of backend, because remember, this is a front-end application, runs on the client side. You cannot copy your private key here, because if not, you are sharing it with the entire world. So it's recommended to have a backend implementation for that. Now you're saying, okay, Diego, but now you are asking us for implementing this in a backend layer. Yes, because in the same way, in the SDKs, HalloID also provides a backend, in this case, for Java. Well, we are working the next ones. That is right here. So this SDK will allow you to perform operations such validation of the private key. So you can sign your own request that you made to HalloID with your private key that was generated here in this step. So at this way, you are very safe that HalloID will validate this private key and will say, okay, since we are storing the public key, we are use that one to decrypt the request that you are sending signed with your private key. If sign doesn't match, just your request is not accepted, and that's it. You are safe. No worries. And it's the same case with HalloID. We also protect our private key and we share our public key. You can find this information right here in working with the keys. It's here, security keys. Yeah. For example, if you come here, you will see that actually in my instance of HalloID, I didn't configure any key pair, but of course I can do it with an environment file. For example, here I have one example of that environment file that you will see that for running the instance of HalloID, instead of configuring this in the Docker Compose file, I can also use this environment file, because this a Docker Compose file is nothing outside of that, and configure the HalloID public key and the private key, so my instance is always secured. All requests that we send or we receive are signed. You are very safe. With this, you are protected, first of all, against credentials stealing. You are protected against phishing. because normally you see that there is some web page designed exactly the same way as the bank landing page that will ask you for your credentials, and they will say, okay, your login failed. Okay, you will believe that maybe you put wrong your password, so you will try it again, and you will instead go to the right side, but your credential was already shared with a theft. So your fingerprint cannot be shared with a theft. And this is the magic part, because as Erikson says, the validation of my biometric is performed in my device. It's never shared either with Halo ID or either, I think, with any passwordless authentication provider, because of the foundation of FIDO2 and the WebAuthn standards. Someone until now has any questions?
Keys, for example, key or
Mhm.
they rely on this protocol too, or
Yes.
there are other protocols?
Yes, because as Erikson explained here, I think was.
Yes, I can respond that.
Yeah.
Yes, they rely on the FIDO2 protocol. And there are also, the first version of the CTAP protocol is the CTAP 1, which is based on U2F. But this protocol is CTAP 2. So it has backward compatibilities with all the YubiKeys or Google Titan devices that you can find in the market. So if you buy one now, it will have compatibility with the CTAP. Yes.
Yeah, it's maybe adding a little bit more is because the platform, I think I can put it in the screen. Yeah. Okay. The platform authenticator means something that is already here in your device, signs your Touch ID, or if you are in your cell phone, your Face ID or something like this. In the case of a YubiKey, will be a roaming because it's an external device that you're adding here. In the relying party authentication, you can also restrict it, because if you want to restrict that only devices with platform authenticator can log in, then you can restrict at the relying party level. So it will only accept that platform request.
Yes, that is why it's called in the protocol the attestation object.
Mm-hmm.
So with attestation, you can say, I only accept Google Titan's external keys or YubiKeys if the organization wants to add another layer of security for the external devices. Welcome.
You execute that, you are kind of like allowing your device to be one way to log in each page.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if you go to another device, you have to do another setup so you could use it.
Yes, indeed, because your identity is never shared with the platform. So your authentication remains in your device. Of course, there are some products, for example, I don't know if you are familiar with passkeys. That's something that Microsoft, Apple, and I think which other one is Microsoft? Yeah, another big company that I don't remember actually is doing. But passkeys, what does is indeed sharing your biometric data. So it's like you can log in here with your fingerprint, and if you go to your Android device, you can also sign with your same fingerprint, and that's okay. But then the question is, how secure is that? For example, you are here in an Apple device that you know that is secure by default. Neither the United States government can hack it. You can expect the same security level in an Android, the cheapest device. That's something that you need to
and
think
to
about.
add to the answer is that the passkeys is also part of the FIDO2
Indeed, it's based on
specification. But you will depend on your provider. If you are using Mac, for example, or Apple devices, you depend on the security of the iCloud, because every credential is shared using iCloud. If you're using an Android-based device, you will use the Google service. So basically, your security is tied to the security of the company can provide you.
Yeah. And in the end, the objective of this is authenticate that you are yourself. No matter, for example, if you see, you can put, let me exit here. The main goal of this technology is validate that you are who you are saying that you are. I can put here Diego, I can put Erikson, I can put whatever, because maybe I don't want to share my name with that company, but I can be sure that only I will be able to log in with this page because I only have my own fingerprint.
Yes.
More questions?
Yeah, I have a question about this a little tricky. All this authentication of your application will depend on this Hello ID server, right?
Mhm.
What happens is that it stops working. You have a workaround to log into your application without complete certification.
That depends. If the server stops working, well, if it's in the
Yeah.
cloud version, of course, we will be fine.
Yeah, but a good practice is that you should always have any fallback authentication process. So you have a passwordless and any SMS or
Yeah.
one-time password via email. So yeah, that's the part of the process.
Yes.
Yeah,
Indeed,
exactly.
indeed, that's the main goal, or maybe a two-factor authentication, or some way that you can still provide in that you are who you say that you are.
Welcome.
Okay, I have another question from YouTube. It's from Felipe Montero. What's the difference between Hello ID and the single sign-on process? How do they differ?
Okay, single sign-on is like having this login page for every service that you want to use. For example, Facebook. I can use Facebook as my single sign-on, maybe for other services for Felipe Delibero and another web pages. But I still using my Facebook credentials, and Facebook credentials relies on passwords.
Passwords, yes.
Basically,
At
that
the end of the
you
day,
can
it's
have your
passwords.
two-factor authentication. Even you can have two-factor enabled, but still you need your password.
You can have one-time passwords, but at the end of the day, it's also passwords.
Yeah.
So it's the same issue.
If I receive that one-time password by default because I hijacked your email and I
Yes,
received the
I can
on-time
get
password to my email, I can still pretending to be you.
Yeah.
It's the question we had from YouTube.
Nice.
Nothing else? No more questions?
No more
Questions?
questions
I
from
have a
YouTube.
question.
Please.
So
Okay.
what
Please.
does the future of Hello ID looks like? So what are the short-term goals? and
Yeah,
long-term?
that's what follows next.
How's this one?
Yeah, first, we thought there will be some question. That's why we stop it right here. Okay, Hello ID. So, what's the future for that? You know that every technical decision should be backed up with money. Everything is driven because of money. If your product manager wants to invest in something or not, it's just that. So actually, the talking about market size is just in worldwide $12.8 billion. But of course, this is the example that we wanted to show you is just a login. But of course, this is not applies only for login. You can apply passwordless for almost everything. If you want to sign your rental agreement contract with your landlord, you can just do it with your fingerprint. Those services are already available even. You can sign transaction using passwordless authentication. If you are doing a transaction, a tiki, for example, if I am doing a tiki for Gerard, I can sign it with my fingerprint. So it's the only way to prove that it's me that is sending that money. You can implement it in the NFT market also, that is rising up. Now that the metaverse is rising up, it's also very important that all validations in the end belongs to a real person. You know that a good credential is something that you are or something that you have. So, okay, you have a fingerprint and you have a finger. Or whatever passwordless authentication method. And of course, identity validation.
Yeah. So as Diego said, at this moment, we are working with passwords, but the future is to cover more use cases. Transactions, for example, and all that Diego said already. So evolve as a platform to get more use cases in Hello ID. That's the future for us, basically.
The future for the entire industry.
For Hello ID and also the market.
For Hello ID, of course.
The market has a good, it's a really good market. A really good market, I think.
That's why you chose it.
So if you want to invest, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some question? I think you have a question. No? Okay. So, thanks everyone for being here. Hope you like it.
If you have any questions, go to helloid.io.
Yes, indeed. Or any question or suggestion or collaborations, please, guys. Wait, let me come here again. Wait, Gabriel, wait my beers.
Take too long.
Helloid.io.
Thank God it's not heavy.
Here is our contact email, even if you want a custom demonstration about how it works, because we actually have an enterprise version rolling out, but just on demand, because storing a cloud service costs a lot of money. So yeah, or if you have any feedback about using the tool, please, this or email. Thanks for everything.
Thank you. It's tea, right? It's tea. Nice.
Yeah, iced tea.
Okay.
And yes, to close it up, our text out. Thank everybody for coming, to watching. Guys in Utrecht, also guys in YouTube. See you next time. Thanks.